abuses of power. In these tumultuous and challenging times of great transition for humanity, we are being forced to repeatedly observe how the values and organizing principles of current human culture have been shaped to distort natural laws and subvert human heart-based values. The main pillars of society have been built to enslave the masses and extract resources for those at the top and their corrupt minions, willing to turn on their fellow human beings. If we look at the main problems created in the world, they have been built upon inverted values, enforced by the controller archetype of the false king of tyranny. The mass media projection of the idolized, successful masculine archetype is one that climbs the corporate or social ladder to be given absolute power in his domain, as long as he plays ball with the upper ruling class. To maintain his status and wealth, he is used to continually commit gross abuses of power that are intentionally directed against his fellow human beings, to propagate slavery to consumerism and to continually profit off of their misery. Without understanding the negative alien agenda oversight in the mind control game behind the creation of these crumbling structures, we misperceive the problems in the world as based on human incompetence and greed. These structures are by design. Yet, without this understanding, many still run to the false king of tyranny like a father figure, hoping that he will extend his almighty power in order to grant them immunity from the evils in the world. Like a traumatized child that has been repeatedly abused by their own parents, many people are still clinging to the appearances of power, unable to see that it is he that is perpetrating the many abuses of power. Many of these power abuses are being highlighted all around us, which we may repeatedly see as being carried out by the controller archetype that lives in the negative ego of fear-based human beings. As the controller's desperation and anxiety increases from losing power in the earthly domain, he is even more aggressive to stay on top, more willing to kill and maim in the process. The exploitations of those weakened in the consciousness shift are being committed as physical, emotional, sexual, spiritual, mental, and social abuses that create intense damage and destruction, not only to the victims, but also commit long-term harm to their communities and industries in a variety of ways. In order to clearly see that abuses of power have been the essential ingredient in the corrupted structure that shapes the society in which we live, we must first recognize that the abuse of power is at an epidemic level of mass proportions. Only when we can see power abuses in hindsight and in action can we begin to comprehend the true purposes that are underlying them. One of the biggest tasks humanity faces is dismantling the mind control programming that was written by the negative alien agenda to worship absolute power as an authority, such as worshiping the rich and famous, or social media celebrities as gods. Somehow, we have been socially conditioned to believe that famous people we all recognize are actually experts at anything. They have been paid copious amounts to appear as an authority in order to represent the marketing of their brands. Why is it that most people do not pay attention or notice the obvious self-serving motivations and conflicts of interest promoted throughout consumerism and popular opinion? People worship outward appearances of power for all the wrong reasons and seek to emulate its image as represented in consumer advertising from the morally and spiritually bankrupt. Misappropriated power is being systematically abused at a terrible human cost, in which ethical conduct and moral character is not even an important factor to consider in conscious decision-making, which greatly impacts our lives. How did that person achieve his wealth, riches, and fame? If he raped, pillaged, or ritualized others for it, should we care? Humanity's obsession with riches, fame, and celebrity on the world stage keeps handing narcissists and psychopaths access to others' resources, which further hands them absolute power and an untouchable status. Humanity is guilty of creating the pedestal for the power elite, as much as they have continually held disdain for the masses and abused their power. This is the time where we must stop and redefine our own relationship to power, and further recontextualize and redesign the meaning of power in our personal life and within world society. This is where the decisional framework must be considered for each person in order to make well-informed decisions about where they place personal consent for abuses of power through their own behaviors. The domineering bullies at the top have always manipulated the knowledge that appearances and marketing illusions are all that matters in controlling the narratives, and that having the substance to back it up is not required. Some people do not value a spiritual platform that is aligned with all of humanity, where unconditional love, forgiveness, compassion, and peace are the set goals for achieving inner coherence while practicing higher standards of ethical behavior. Instead, they may believe that these are qualities and attributes of weak and ignorant people, and the only way to success is ruthless self-interest in a dog-eat-dog world. Each person must decide if they are willing to be aligned to their purposes of spiritual growth and to grow into feeling empathy for living things, as this is intrinsic to becoming an authentic and balanced human during the ascension cycle. By accepting the challenge that we all face in life on Earth, as we are emerging from the dark eon of non-human entity invasion, this phase supports us to increase personal competencies and gain self-knowledge, to grow into our highest spiritual strength in the true form of benevolent power. If we refuse to recognize life's challenges as lessons and opportunities for spiritual growth, and cannot gain valuable wisdom from the direct gnosis of higher truths, we are missing the most important message of our time on Earth during the ascension cycle. Institutional structures serve master-slave mentality. The controller-guided institutional structures that model abuses of power by worshiping profit-based incentives and materialist consumerism over the well-being of humans are broken and corrupt. They are designed to serve those with the master-slave mentality. We must first realize that the long-term intent of these massive institutions is for mass conformity into the slave mentality, while gradually introducing soft-kill methods of a pre-planned and controlled genocide. The promotion of poverty, war, disease, and human misery are all serving the master mentality that is backed by the alien handlers. Therefore, it is important to understand that the corrupt systems which govern and control human culture have been socially engineered by the negative alien agenda and power elite for the purpose of consciousness enslavement in order to achieve these objectives. We have all been groomed to accept the controller pillars of the 3D narrative and to accept abuses of power as a standard human behavior carried out by the self-proclaimed masters. Abuses of power embedded in the system are not merely a random action or an honest mistake made by putting greedy and corrupt people in positions of power over others. Although this is a strong factor, because most of the people in the higher rungs of power have been placed there due to their low ethics or have infiltrated through some larger agenda. It is the intentional design in the way the societal structures have been meticulously built through secretive means to take control over and shape humanity into the slave mentality, to capture people's thoughts, and to influence them in the direction the controllers want them to go. Power abuses were an essential feature, intentionally designed into the institutions and organizations that were created centuries ago, in order to legitimize and monetize human suffering and world slavery for the tranquil benefit of the few. This means we must decide how much we are willing to know of these unpleasant truths that have been built into the firmament of pillars running our society. To what degree can we recognize that we have been intentionally programmed to be totally dependent upon them in order to submit to absolute authority, no matter how inhumane or cruel? Classified documents and non-disclosure agreements under penalty of total annihilation of one's life and livelihood keep many a potential whistleblower's mouth shut. This deeper knowledge will inherently change our worldview and belief systems as we shed the slave mentality and begin to critically think for ourselves in order to become a productive cause for improving the lives of all people worldwide. Origins of power abuses. For centuries, the negative alien agenda have developed and exploited multidimensional occult practices through reversal creation code for the purpose of mind control and social engineering in order to harvest negative emotional energy or energetic loosh from the inhabitants of planet Earth. Much of these occult practices can be classified as satanic ritual abuse and black magic, and are under the direct aid of the negative aliens to all that use these methods for gaining power and control over others. The exploitation of planet Earth as a harvestable energy source for hidden extra-dimensional non-human entities has created the conditions of worldwide consciousness enslavement, which led to the gross abuses of power made against the human species without their consent and explicit awareness. Energy is recognized as the key to all activity on the earth, and by controlling the world's energy supply. There is absolute control given to those who have harnessed it for their agendas of world slavery. If the methods of harnessing the energy and the real agendas are kept secret, those people easily become the controllers of some industry or domain and are able to use that power to keep enforcing the slave mentality in the masses. The much sought-after spiritual energy on planet Earth is contained in the multidimensional layers of the consciousness fields that comprise the entire Earth's energy body or light body. Every inhabitant of planet Earth has an energetic interface in which their spiritual bodies connect into these same multidimensional layers that make up the systems of electromagnetic fields in the Earth. The human body functions like a nerve cell of the planet, connected with all the other nerve cells that exist together within the planetary body. A nerve cell is an electrically excitable cell that receives, processes, and transmits information through electrical and chemical signals into neural networks. Similar to bundles of nerve cells in an individual body, all human bodies are connected to each other and form massive neural networks that runs an immense amount of electromagnetic energy and intelligent information into the Earth body. This consciousness energy is intelligent information recorded in the planetary brain and its complex neurological system, which is the planetary grid network referred to as ley lines and axiotonal lines. So when hidden technology is used for harvesting energy and intelligent instruction sets from planet Earth's grid network, the collective consciousness energy that is being produced from the individual soul spiritual layers is also being drained from the human body, along with the energy quanta that exists within the planetary body itself. All the kingdoms of nature are living things that also produce an enormous collective energy supply in the planet, which is also controlled and suppressed from becoming common knowledge. Electromagnetic energy is absorbed or emitted in distinct packets that contain intelligent consciousness information or is distributed through energy quanta in the Earth. The loss of the available consciousness energy on the planet manifests as a system of entropy for all inhabitants, skimming creative life force off the top to be taken elsewhere. This is what makes a system break down, fall apart, instigate chaos, breed diseases, and function far less efficiently, which is another strategic method for setting the conditions of world slavery. Additionally, entropic systems are continually propagated by the negative alien agenda to steal the natural energy produced by the individual to be distributed into the larger harvesting structures. These structures direct the energy for the explicit use of other controlling entities, both human and non-human, working the long-term enslavement agendas. Similar to a pyramidal hierarchy where all energy resources generated are funneled from the bottom tiers up into the top tiers for their personal benefit, energy is extracted, without those on the bottom comprehending how much of their personal energy or valuable currency is being taken by those at the top. Genetics are currency. The harvesting of genetic material and consciousness energy is the most valuable type of currency and is used as a medium of exchange by more advanced cultures than what we have currently inherited through the dark age of the negative alien invasion. One should be aware that on many other planets, monetary systems such as ours do not exist. For the invading species to continue to access the planetary consciousness energy supply without further resistance, humanity has been groomed to ignore genetics and consciousness access as a valuable currency, and to focus instead only on an imaginary money supply that is completely controlled and manipulated. Humans are taught to worship the money supply as their primary identification with material success, power, and personal fulfillment, as this mind control program to seek power through money has been explicitly designed by the controllers as a hidden enslavement tool. Off-planet, accessing consciousness energy and sentient intelligence is the highly valued currency, prized by many extra-dimensional species as a medium of exchange and for generating intelligence for their virtual reality systems. Thus, by having free access to massive amounts of genetic material and consciousness energy produced by someone or something else, this gives an incredible amount of power to those controlling entities who are reaping the benefits of harvesting that energy from others. This model is surfacing in the mainstream through the advertising of the popular personal genomic companies that use genotyping for their DNA tests, which are now offered to consumers that want to know about their ancestry. Most people do not realize the potential billions of dollars these companies make on the DNA catalogs, which people taking these tests are giving them easy access to. They partner with major biotechnology and pharmaceutical companies to effectively monetize human DNA under the research and development label, which is actually used primarily for nefarious purposes. Digital currency companies that offer a consumer the ability to sequence their own DNA through genetic testing are then able to monetize it by selling the information to a collection of data buyers via cryptocurrency. And these are beginning right now. If we can sell our own sequenced DNA for a profit to an enthusiastic buyer for cryptocurrency, we should stop to reflect on the real purpose behind this agenda. Why would they want the intimate details of our consciousness history that is recorded in our sequenced DNA? Exchange it for cryptocurrency and then hand it over to an anonymous corporation in order to control it. Sequencing of human genomes is an unfathomable area of massive profits, translatable into any marketable currency. It is also used for gaining control over consciousness energy and exposes yet another layer to the black hole entity's agenda that want direct access to fully sequenced genomes in the mass population. Remember that the type of DNA sequence that a human being has is responsible for the level of consciousness they have, as well as the level of access they have to move through stargates and portal systems on the Earth. DNA holds the consciousness record in a natural, biospiritual internet and holds the dimensional keys and the timelines that unlock dimensional doorways throughout the time matrix. Victors of war rewrote world history. When the planet Earth was slowly invaded through a series of historical timeline trigger events, the victors of the last war were not human beings. Thus, the negative alien agenda was able to freely access the energy quanta of Earth and her inhabitants without resistance, because awareness of this fact was methodically erased from historical references and the information suppressed from Earth humans. Effectively, this produced anti-human control and mass consciousness enslavement on the Earth. The incarnating Earth human was no longer able to naturally access the intelligent consciousness of his own spiritual body without employing sophisticated esoteric practices that necessitated long-term efforts for rebuilding the consciousness. The techniques for building the light body were taught in the mystery schools of various lineages, and this information was a tightly held secret, only given to the sequestered monks, elite, or the ruling classes. The timeline event in which history was rewritten occurred during the Sumerian-Egyptian invasion, which scrambled the original human DNA, creating what science now calls junk DNA, which is unplugged or inactive DNA. This is when we lost access to our real historical records, including the Law of One. It is at this point in the timeline of the final invasion that the victors of war rewrote world history, which is what we are told happened today through the standard educational curriculum. Around 5,500 years ago, they began methodically forming genetic and social engineering programs that shaped worldviews appropriate to the current collective consciousness level. They spread the death culture and slave mentality through divide and conquer tactics in an organized and systematic infiltration of the human culture. Through the continual insertion of the predator mind into human culture, the agenda was to create great reward for inverted systems, systems which are organized to place higher social value on predator behaviors, such as the violent characteristics of total domination and world power, using brute force, survival of the fittest, war and victimization for propagating self-enforced slavery. This set the stage for socially conditioning abuses of power as a normalized way of life, effectively producing victims and victimizer archetypes in the minds of the people in order to spread the reptilian virus of enemy patterning throughout the globe. Since the invasion, humanity has been groomed and continually conditioned to behave in accordance with the low standards of morality and ethics that the death culture has set as the dominant social structure in order to create the conditions for abuses of power to be rampant and yet go largely unnoticed by the masses. The master and slave narrative is mind control. To remove human resistance to their long-term takeover agenda, the secretive infiltration of the core societal and organizational structures began thousands of years ago, silently and methodically, introducing inverted systems to take over the structures governing the top hierarchy in monarchy, military, political, religious, medical, financial, and legal systems. This would be ideal to shape the value systems that generate the Pavlovian style of behavior modification in material-based reality that they seek to control. Through the engineering of a labyrinth of self-enforced enslavement policies based on fear and intimidation to control the minds of the Earth inhabitants, they would use minimal off-planet resources and remain invisible as the ruling class. The people on Earth would effectively enforce their own enslavement, as well as enslave their own global human family by giving up their rights, their access to knowledge, and their resources. This is very effective for takeover and invasion with minimal resistance or revolt by the inhabitants, who are unaware they are being invaded by an unseen enemy and that a silent war is being carried out against them. The negative alien agenda and controllers use the hidden mind control game to play the master-slave narrative against another species, Earth humans, which is designed to invoke submission to the brute power as the authority and to accept power abuses as a normal part of everyday life in order to ensure a means for personal survival. They indoctrinated the power elite into the master-slave narrative in order to act as their representative prison wardens on the surface, aligning them with the alien invasion slavery agenda, rather than siding with humanity. To better understand the recipe for the master-slave narrative and how it spreads fear and survival consciousness, let's look at slavery in America and the mindset of slave owners during that timeline, which motivated it. Think of the mindset of the slave owners as the negative alien agenda and the conditions that are created for mental slavery, emotional slavery, spiritual slavery, and physical slavery that are imposed on all of humanity across the globe, regardless of their tribe, sex, or skin color. We may only think of slavery as a physical event in which a ball and chain or four walls have imprisoned the physical body. However, slavery extends to the mind, emotions, and spirit. To understand the effects of world slavery and how it has impacted all of us, individually and collectively, we have to begin to think of slavery at all the levels it is being perpetrated: physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. Depending on the cultural narrative, demographics, and prosperity of the nation, this will inform us of how the master-slave narrative is used to generate learned helplessness and dependency on the corrupt inverted systems in order to self-enforce enslavement in that population, and the extent to which the common people will mimic the same slavery mindset to self-enforce the same types of oppression upon their brother or sister when they don't conform to the consensus narrative. The enslaved mind that has been conditioned to feel secure while conforming to the master-slave narrative will enforce those same conditions of slavery on others from their own deep subconscious fears. The Germanic groups introduced the first captured Africans to America in the early 17th century, which evolved into a nightmare of abuse and cruelty that would ultimately divide the people into destructive and painful conflicts, which largely remain unhealed in the human psyche today. Today, slavery in all its forms is a global epidemic and the result of the dark age of consciousness enslavement. The Dutch and Germanic groups kidnapped families, ripped them from their homeland, shipped them to another continent, advertised and sold them as purchased property as free labor sources for farms and plantation owners in the new colonies. New slave owners enjoying the massive profits and wealthy status from free labor started to methodically plan ways that the slaves would become completely dependent upon them, to generate a slave mentality of perfect submission to abusive behaviors. They stripped away their dignity through dehumanization tactics, and by developing restrictions that prevented that person's natural development and growth as an independent human being. Slaves were not given human rights, were not allowed to be educated to read and write, and their behaviors, movement, and access were extremely restricted by the consequence of vicious punishment or death. Many slave owners raped slave women at will and with their partner or children looking on, and this did not matter as she was only property. The slave owners of the South became a controlling power in the world in cotton production, all because of the big profits made on the misery of slave labor. As more people became slave owners, they profited greatly and justified their reasons for doing so. Thus, they created convenient belief systems that suited their own negative ego and personal views, such as believing the God in their Bible actually endorses slavery. Because their actions included gross power abuses that were inherently feeding anti-life and anti-human ideologies, and they gradually lost their inherent human qualities, they lost the capacity to feel empathy and compassion for others enduring miserable conditions. By believing another living human being was a piece of property and a defective creature designed for such purpose, they started to justify cruelty and brutality as acceptable treatment and conditions that suited their corrupt and selfish belief systems. When groups of people start to classify other groups of people as subhuman, this is the direct recipe for generating violent acts that lead to human genocide. Human genocide, the killing of our own species by our own hands, is a favorite agenda for the negative aliens. All of this quick wealth and money on slave labor and the worldwide economic impact it had began a socio-political movement into the positive pro-slavery ideology among many people in the South that were reaping its many rewards. The propaganda was that slavery was not evil, but a positive and moral good, to help what was believed to be a defective group of people attain civility in a Christian civilization. And this belief was postulated among those profiting from slavery the most. This same formula for producing slavery is still in place, although the timeline has changed and the power has shifted into the hands of the more technologically advanced psychopath. The mindset to profit on the misery of others and achieve world domination via control of wealth and resources through worldwide slavery is exactly how the human and non-human controller thinks. Slave owner, controller, or negative alien mindset. Although the origin of the quoted document below remains unknown, many of the concepts expose mass manipulation techniques right out of the negative alien agenda playbook that are used for producing slavery in the masses. The following examples are quotes taken directly from the Silent Weapons for Quiet Wars document as a strong case study for understanding the slave owner, controller, or negative alien mindset that is used to divide and conquer humanity. Quote, "People are beasts of burden and stakes on the table by their own choice and consent. People that will not use their intelligence are no better than animals. Thus, when you assume the appearance of power, people soon give it to you. Low-class elements of society must be trained and housebroken in order to be brought under total control. The quality of education given to the lower class must be of the poorest. to generate the schism of ignorance so that the inferior class is unable to comprehend the power structure and knowledge of the superior class. The lower class family unit must be disintegrated by a process of increasing preoccupation of the parents and the establishment of government-operated daycare centers for the occupationally orphaned children. Keep the public entertainment below a 6th grade level. Use difficult-to-detect weapons such as advanced technology, economic manipulation, destruction of the family, and an intentionally inferior educational system. Experience has proven that the simplest method of securing a silent weapon and gaining control of the public is to keep the public undisciplined and ignorant of the basic system principles on one hand, while keeping them confused, disorganized, and distracted with matters of no real importance on the other hand. Continue to promote private silent wars against the ignorant masses to shift the energy resources and economic control into the hands of the worthy few. This form of slavery is essential to maintain some measure of social order, peace, and tranquility for the ruling upper class. Social engineering requires the correlation of great amounts of constantly changing economic information and personal data. So computerized data processing systems to gather profiles are necessary to predict when and how society will arrive for capitulation. Eventually, every individual element of the structure should come under computer control through a knowledge of personal preferences, such knowledge guaranteed by computer association of consumer preferences with identified consumers via association with the use of a credit card, and later, a permanent tattooed body number. The general public refuses to improve its own mentality and its faith in its fellow man. It has become a herd of proliferating barbarians and a blight upon the face of the earth. Therefore, the silent weapon is a type of biological warfare. It attacks the vitality, options, and mobility of the individuals of a society by knowing, understanding, manipulating, and attacking their sources of natural and social energy, and their physical, mental, and emotional strengths and weaknesses. Diversion keeps the people compliant and prevents them from seeing what is really going on. End quote. Consider this information to more deeply understand the mentality of the opposition. Thus, the controllers intend that the master-slave mentality is to be propagated and controlled through the continual social engineering of mass broadcasts of fear-based thought forms, as who and what you fear is ultimately what owns you. This is another profound reason why we must clear our fears and choose love instead, which leads us back into the eternal source. Align with humanity. In consideration to pay more attention to the nature of power abuses that happen all around us, if we are willing to go to the overview picture, we have a much larger frame of reference from which we can personally confirm what we have experienced or discovered through our own observations. A consciousness war with silent weapons against humanity is underway without their knowledge and is being carried out on the ground through society's institutions. Humanity has been exposed and subjected to these nefarious agendas of targeted social engineering and mind control in order to gradually progress this diabolical plan, which ultimately was to gain complete control over humanity at the time of planetary ascension. To refuse to be manipulated and used for spreading anti-human control through the conditioned slave mentality that is inherent within the war over consciousness, we must educate ourselves to better know the control system and see the setup for abuses of power in the architecture, studying the selfish and ruthless nature of psychopathic predators and profiteers of human misery. Help us to understand how the negative alien agenda and controllers think. We recognize the reasons behind their motivation for global domination and gaining total control over human DNA as the ultimate access to consciousness as the genetic currency. Once we can clearly see the corruption in the structure of the system, we can be aware to consciously choose not to willingly participate with it by not giving it our consent. Be fully present and aware of any document you are asked to sign online or otherwise, with rambling legalese or disclaimers designed to take your right to privacy away. Although you may be forced to interact with it for whatever reason, still intend to state your lack of consent to all legal manipulation used in words or in harmful intent that is hiding any subterfuge anytime you are interacting online or signing any document. Remember that all free services that are for personal data collection are a part of the negative alien strategy for social and genetic engineering of the human race at a global scale. When signing up for free social media technology like Facebook, it is basically you handing them all of your personal information that can be collected and used against you and others at some time in the future. The controllers manipulate and falsify data to serve their own agendas on a regular basis, and this information is fed into the mainstream media to further manipulate the public. Some of the richest people on earth are purveyors of online data collection from the masses. So think deeply on why these people are some of the world's wealthiest. Essentially, don't give your power away to those appearing to falsely be in power and control, and do not follow or submit to anyone or anything that claims to have authority over you. Leadership versus tyranny. In any type of organization or group consciousness, it can be extremely challenging to navigate the uncleared individual and group negative ego behaviors and determine what behaviors define as leadership versus tyranny. Negative ego behaviors are usually entwined with low ethical conduct, which damages building trust between people in order to communicate transparently and honestly with each other. Communication breakdowns break trust and destroy relationships. Many have been intentionally confused to think the qualities of leadership and authoritative influence is defined by selfish egotists with alpha-type behaviors that focus upon generating an external locus of control-based power. We all want to stay clear of feeding the tyrant as a leader or authority. When we have clarity to identify control-oriented authority based on the negative ego profiles, we are more equipped to discern proper authority patterns when involved in any kind of leadership scenario. Wherever there is an organization or group, there will be some kind of stewardship or leadership responsibility that will assume the authority required to serve that organization. Please refer to this month's newsletter for the leadership versus tyranny graphic. In the highest expression, we want to learn how to self-lead in a healthy and balanced way through the development of strong moral character and trustworthy traits, modeled through the community that we may observe or participate with. This way, by learning self-mastery or self-leadership skills, one is building confidence in free thinking and free expression, while embodying the ethical conduct necessary to build strength in inner-directed personal power. Otherwise, we are mind-controlled puppets playing out repeated archetypes of drama and like a hamster on a wheel, running in circles of karmic looping. We hope this is helpful now as we develop the skill of discerning trustworthiness in ourselves and others, as well as the prevention of feeding, rewarding, and giving authoritative power to narcissistic and psychopathic personalities. Tyrannical behaviors are no substitute for leadership and should never be confused with actual leadership. Polarity, archetypal thought forms for slave mentality. Many times, what we fear in others is the hidden unconscious behavior and impulses we have not cleared from within our deepest selves. Until we are willing to look at hidden fears or subconscious beliefs, we can easily project or transfer our beliefs onto other people, especially with our unconscious impulses or pain body. In support to better recognize mind control implants or negative beliefs clouding the subconscious layers of the mind, we have provided a list of the most common polarity archetypal thought forms used for creating slave mentality in the masses. As you extract fear-based control and negative polarity thought forms from ruling the mind, replace these thoughts with self-love, self-acceptance, and self-worth. Intend to identify, locate, remove, and repair these archetypal thought forms in your unconscious, instinctual, and conscious mind. Clear victim-victimizer, predator-prey, master-slave, rich tyrant, poor serf, royalty, peasant. Famous is important, not famous is insignificant. Beautiful, ugly. Accept abuse and sociopathy. Accept paltry condition and deprivation. Apathy and lack of interest. Being seen and not heard. Carrying out orders. Obey. Do not question authority. Enforce the law. Fear of punishment and pain. Females are breeders and objects. Kill the infidel or nonconformist. Powerlessness, helplessness, submitting to external power. Unworthiness, low rank. Women and children subservient to male pleasure. War and killing is necessary. Electronic forms of mind control are unseen by most, and yet they can be embedded virtually anywhere in our environment, radiating these belief systems into our deepest psyche. Most commonly, it is directed into the subconscious mind when watching movies or interacting with any kind of media that has negative messages that portray humanity in deviant and depraved images. Be aware of these archetypes of control and where you may have weakness that plays out these thought forms in your sense of identity from the narratives playing out in your mind. It is necessary to clear out these negative labels of association and to reframe your sense of identity with something that is heart-based and meaningful to you. Essentially, we must drop our storyline and create a new one that includes unconditionally loving ourselves. We suggest connecting with the eternal God Self, that which transcends all polarity and all narratives into pure loving kindness and compassionate witnessing. affirm, I am the eternal self, and I know who I am. Basic universal lessons. The Anti-Life Society has been founded upon having no value or purpose for human existence except to monetize and abuse it for instant self-gratification. Those behind the agenda have no remorse for the power abuses that result in the profound suffering of humanity. Although we live in challenging times, we must choose what kind of person we want to be and understand that developing personal integrity that aligns to a positive value system is essential to becoming a stable, clear, and trustworthy person. We don't have to unconsciously act out the slave mentality that the controllers have socially engineered and implanted in us. If we are willing to wake up to see what's really happening in our world. Ascension essentially encompasses a universal perspective towards the compassionate practice of world humanism, which includes the entire spectrum of life, all the inhabitants of the world, no matter what race, religion, belief, or creed, to be equally deserving of benevolence, empathy, and compassion. We can work towards embodying these higher goals that guide our behavior throughout our personal sphere of influence, which then spreads out to others. There are basic moral principles that represent the wisdom of human experience that are so widely held that they can be thought of as universal principles that can be applied to everyone, everywhere, right now. When we include these principles as moral guidelines that instruct our behaviors in life, they protect us as well as others around us. In this way, we are being of service to align with humanity first, so that we are not being manipulated to place blame conveniently on others, knowing we all have been subjected to forms of consciousness enslavement. We've all been lied to many times over. Remembering this, we can have more compassion for our brothers and sisters in pain when they are acting out unconsciously and being used as dark portals. Intend to do good in the world. Avoid evil and harm. To develop the power of virtues within the human spirit, there is a constant commitment to do good works in the world through one's behaviors and actions. All other moral principles flow from this basic concept that most of us know in our heart, if we are willing to listen to what is good and what is evil and constitutes great harm. The Golden Rule, do unto others. The Golden Rule is the most essential basis for the modern concept of human rights, in which each individual has a right to just treatment and a reciprocal responsibility to ensure justice for others. The Golden Rule is an ethical code or moral truth that essentially states, one should treat others as one would like to be treated by others. It is commonly referred to as do unto others. This concept describes a two-way relationship between oneself and others that involves both sides equally and in a mutual benefit or win-win fashion. The end does not justify the means. Essentially, this means that one cannot commit a series of knowingly fraudulent and dishonest acts, even if it was purportedly done for an honorable cause. One may not commit harm or evil thinking that in the end, goodness may result from these harmful actions. This means that we must look towards fundamental principles in structures that are designed for promoting good works and aligned to the actions that are essential to creating those conditions. One cannot justify violating the fundamental principles of the original intention because you believe that the outcome will result in some imagined positive goal. When we compromise our personal integrity, we allow a backdoor vulnerability for dark force manipulation that many times descends even more darkness and chaos into the situation where we had made the compromise. Follow natural law. By observing nature and making decisions that respect the nature of things throughout creation, we learn to follow what nature intends. When we live in harmony with the natural laws, we live in harmony with ourselves. If we violate the natural laws, we suffer greatly. At its most basic level, the science of right living is essentially understood as this: when we live in harmony with ourselves and others, we are living in harmony with the universal laws, and this drastically increases the quality of life for everyone. As an example, the law of one practices are a science of right living given to human beings. To receive more love, we must become more loving.